What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today, we're talking the latest episode of WWE Untold, focusing on Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and the Royal Rumble. This episode went up on Sunday night on the network around 8 p.m. Eastern, I believe. I think they've usually been putting up these new shows for Untold on Sundays, if I'm not mistaken, if not on Saturdays. Sometimes it changes, but still, this was great. I know it's Tuesday as I record this, and I'm putting this up now. I didn't have a chance to watch it until literally this morning. That's how busy and more so sick I've been for the last, maybe 5 or 6 days. Like, it's been pretty bad. I know I sounded pretty bad when I recorded #AskGSM on Wednesday last week. Wrestle Rant Radio, same thing. It got even worse than that. Over the weekend, I was like on my fucking deathbed, I felt like. And maybe obviously I wasn't, but I never get sick. And when I get sick, I get really, really sick. It's not like I had the flu or whatever. I wasn't dying. It sure felt like I was. But when I get sick, like with the cold or something, I get really, really sick. And it sucks for someone like me who talks a lot with the YouTube stuff and the podcast stuff and whatever else, the radio shows and whatever. So, it sucks. Thankfully, I didn't have a lot to breakdown audio-wise over the weekend. I did do that SmackDown review on Saturday. That took a toll on me, even though it was on the shorter side. But I still managed to get it done and record it and whatever. So that went up on Saturday. This went up on Sunday. The episode aired on the network. I didn't watch it until today. I've just been busy and sick, so I apologize for the delay. But this was well worth the wait. I didn't know how long this thing was going to be. Usually these Untold shows are around like 20 minutes. This was probably the longest one yet at 36 minutes. And they've had some great ones. They did one on Kane's debut back in October. They did one on Team Hell No over the summer. They did one on Sting's final WWE match, actually final match period to date, in 2015 against Seth Rollins, which was also amazing. This one, excuse me, I'm going to be coughing a lot, so I apologize. Was also really, really good. I wasn't sure when I saw the title and I saw the preview for it if it was going to focus solely on Rey Mysterio dedicating the 2006 Rumble victory to Eddie Guerrero or what. I mean, it was 36 minutes, so it had to be more than that. I didn't know how long it was until I saw it this morning. So then come to find out, it's more than just about the Rumble stuff. Obviously, it's very timely with the Rumble being next weekend. That's probably why they aired it when they did. I was wondering, is it Eddie's birthday? Is it Rey's birthday? Is it the anniversary of their feud or something? No, it's just the Rumble next week, and that's why they aired it now. That's why the Rumble is in the title. But no, they talked about way more than just the Rumble stuff. They talked about their WWE feud from right before Eddie passed. Eddie's passing itself, they discussed. They discussed them both coming into the company, becoming tag team champions. Even before that, they discussed their WCW feud, the Halloween Havoc stuff in 1997, when one of the best, if not the best match from 1997, Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero from that pay-per-view in WCW. They also discussed their upbringing and Rey Mysterio's kind of, upbringing in the business, stuff like that, and how they feel about each other. Really, really good stuff. This was absolutely excellent. So without further ado, let's get started here. One of the first things we hear Rey say to kick the show off, he says, God had plans for us. And those plans were to eventually conquer the wrestling world together. That's what Rey says to kick this thing off, which was really cool. We hear from Eddie, who, I don't know when this was recorded, probably shortly before his death, because he looked like he did in 2005 and not when he had longer hair. So this was probably from like 04, 05. He was asked by the interviewer what he thought of Rey Mysterio, and he said that he always respected Rey Mysterio's positive attitude. He really praises Rey as someone that he knows and loves very, very well. He knows very well and he loves very much. Rey Mysterio also talks about how when he first started wrestling as Rey Mysterio Jr., because Rey Mysterio Sr., the original Rey Mysterio, I mean, I'm sure most people know this or listening to this. If you're a real wrestling fan, you would probably already know this. That Rey Mysterio Sr. is not his father, it's his uncle. He adopted the name from his uncle, Rey Mysterio Sr. And he's always wanted to use the English translation of the name more, which translates to Rey Mysterio is King of Mystery. Rey is king, and Mysterio is obviously mystery. So anyway, he talks about how he loved as a kid, spending the night at his uncle's house. That was something he cherished very much as a child. He used to watch him wrestle live, and he loved the attention his uncle got as both a babyface and as a heel. So he explains here that the babyfaces in Mexican wrestling are called technicos, or I believe that's how you pronounce it. Technicos is face, and then heels are Rulos. Again, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but that's basically what he says here, which is very important because he ties that into Eddie Guerrero and how Eddie Guerrero could do both amazingly well. Eddie was so good. One of the few people I think who can really master it, Chris Jericho being another, and probably a few others, CM Punk being one that comes to mind. I'm sure there's a lot more than that in the last, number of years. But in recent memory, Punk, Eddie, and Jericho are three that come to mind as people who could do the babyface and heel roles remarkably well. They were just as good of a babyface as they were as a heel. For all the people who loved them, there was same people wanted to fucking, see their asses get kicked, really wanted to hate their guts after they went heel. That's how great Eddie was, because he could do both roles amazingly well. We hear from Jonathan Coachman. So this isn't your typical Untold where you hear from a bunch of people, like a lot of talking heads. This one, we literally only hear from Eddie, from obviously before he passed and probably 2005. We hear a little bit from Jonathan Coachman here and a little later on during the Rumble stuff at the beginning and the end of this episode. And then just Ray. And then obviously Dominic too, I guess. I don't think we hear from anyone else. It's only those four people, which I like. Shorter and sweeter, and it's straight to the point. I like that a lot. So anyway, Jonathan Coachman, who was close with Eddie back in the day, said that Eddie was addicted to the wrestling business, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. A lot of people connected with Eddie, both the fans, wrestlers, and he said that no one had a problem working with Eddie. But like anyone else, he had a lot of flaws. Rey Mysterio, growing up, always really wanted to work with Eddie. If someone asked him, do you want to work with Eddie? He would say absolutely yes. If he was told as a kid, hey, you guys are going to have the match of the year, he probably would have never believed them. But it did happen in 1997 at the WCW Halloween Havoc pay-per-view when they collided, I believe, for the Cruiserweight Championship. I'm not sure. The title was probably on the line, but I do remember the match very well. These guys, it was a lot less about the championship, I believe, if the championship was on the line, and it was way more about just their chemistry and the feud they were having at that point. So Rey Mysterio doesn't really talk about the championship. He talks a lot more about what went into the match beforehand, behind the scenes. So he said in WCW, that was a place where you had to do what you were told to do. If they told you to do something, you had to do it. It's not like, not that WWE's like a democracy, but like, they have some leeway with stuff you could do. I imagine, maybe not now, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they were very strict with what WCW wanted them to do. So if they really, or when I say WCW, I mean like largely Eric Bischoff. Not that he was a dictator in that way, but they seemed pretty strict when it came to that type of stuff, especially with things that didn't make any sense. Rey Mysterio didn't want to lose his mask. They were doing an angle at that point with all the other luchadors on the roster who were getting unmasked. I think Psychosis got unmasked. Juventud Guerrera got unmasked. Rey Mysterio was next. He knew he was next. He didn't want to be next. He didn't want to lose his fucking mask. So Rey Mysterio, I guess it told some people, and the word spread around that he wasn't going to be there for the pay-per-view. He was just going to no-show. The match almost never happened. One of the greatest matches in WCW history, and one of the greatest matches in the careers of both men, actually almost never happened because Rey Mysterio almost no-showed the event. Eric Bischoff found out about this. He got word that Mysterio might not be there, and he said, listen, you're going to go to the show, you're going to show up, and you're going to do what I tell you to do. You're going to do the match, you're going to unmask, and if not, you're in breach of contract. So, if he didn't do what he was told to do, he was pretty much screwed. Not that just he was fired, he was going to get sued and all this other stuff. That's what breach of contract means, essentially. So Rey Mysterio was like, fine, I'll do it. So he goes to the show, they were about to do the match, they find out 2 matches before theirs. So like shortly beforehand, maybe about a half an hour or so, before Eddie and Rey were supposed to go out there and have their match, that the finish was going to be changed from Eddie going over and unmasking Rey to Rey going over, and Eddie didn't have to be unmasked because he wasn't wearing a mask at that point, but just the finish would be changed to Rey Mysterio going over. Why? I have no idea. Rey Mysterio did end up unmasking in WCW as part of the whole fucking, I think it was part of the LWO stable, I believe. If not that, then some other dumb stable they unmasked him for, which is still one of the dumbest decisions I've ever seen to this day. Still one of the dumbest things WCW ever did. By far. Thank God WWE never did that shit. I mean, they've had people take his mask off as recently as 2 weeks ago with Andrade, but they haven't turned that into a storyline where like, oh, I'm walking around unmasked. Like, I think that's insanely stupid. But that's not really the point here. So they go out there for the match. Rey Mysterio was freaking out because the finish gets changed. Eddie just tells him, listen, dude, just open your ears. And Ray was kind of freaking out about that because the gear that he was wearing that night was like this phantom-like gear where the bodysuit that he was wearing bled into the mask. The mask was part of the suit. So it wasn't like one of his normal masks where it had some space there and, he could not take it off, but like adjust it so he could hear what Eddie was saying. He didn't have that luxury. So it was a real fucking, not pain, but it was a challenge for Rey Mysterio to hear Eddie, who took his lead. And he just went on from there, and he still gets chills thinking about that match to this day and how well they worked together and just how great that fucking match was. It still is, to this day, over 20 years later, one of the greatest matches in the last 25 years, if not ever. And definitely in the history of that company was Eddie and Ray at Halloween Havoc 1997. So we hear from Eddie when asked about what he thinks about Rey Mysterio and what Rey Mysterio will ultimately be remembered for. And he says that Rey Mysterio will be remembered as a giant killer, that he's a guy that never took no for an answer, and that he would always go in there and kind of blow people away. He overcame all the odds, became successful, and people love him. People love working with Rey Mysterio. So we're then shown a graphic that describes that Ray joined Eddie Guerrero in WWE in 2002. So Eddie joined WWE in 2000 originally as part of the Radicals with Benoit, Perry Saturn, Eddie, and then, not Jericho. God, who was the other guy? I'm blanking here. Dean Malenko, obviously. I'm such a fucking idiot. Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero all arrived in WWE in 2000, right after Chris Jericho. Eddie got fired soon after that. He got fired from the company. And then he also actually got brought back in 2002. So he came back to the company, I want to say in May or April. I think April. Eddie Guerrero was rehired at WWE, and Rey Mysterio came in after the WCW. Like, he didn't come in for the invasion. He came in well after the fact in the summer of July of 2002. But before 2005, according to Rey Mysterio, they had never teamed up before. They had a ton of matches and a ton of different companies, but never before had they teamed up. I'm sure maybe once or twice here and there over the years, but never on a regular basis is what he means. But they instantly had chemistry with each other, and they made for a great team, winning the tag team titles in 2005 at the No Way Out pay-per-view, and there really was no better way to kick off that year for Ray than to team with Eddie Guerrero. But Eddie, around that time, really wanted to be a bad guy. That was coming off his WWE Championship run, and he was kind of floundering before the story with Rey Mysterio. I don't really remember what else he was doing that year. I remember he was feuding with, Kurt Angle for the remainder of 2004. He lost the championship to JBL that summer. Then I think he rekindled his rivalry with Kurt. So he didn't really do a lot in the remainder of 2004 before he joined up with Ray at the onset of 2005. But so he really wanted to switch things up, go back to being a bad guy. The Dominic story, with the whole thing about Dominic being Eddie's son and he wanted Ray to take care of him, look after him, whatever, was the brainchild of Bruce Pritchard and Eddie himself. Ray said that's a cool story and all, but we got to get Dominic to sign off on this, obviously, if he's going to be involved. So he said that was the hard part. Dominic actually said, when we hear from him here, said that he didn't want to do it at first. He didn't really want to be on TV. Really wasn't something that he was comfortable with until, funnily enough, he was told that he'd be getting paid for his efforts. And as an 8-year-old kid who really likes toys and whatnot, he's like, honestly, that's not a bad idea. So he ended up doing the angle and got paid for being a part of it. And we see, shots of Dominic with his toys, and I thought that was great. I mean, hey, who can blame him? If you're a fucking 8-year-old kid and you're being told you're going to be on TV, which didn't really interest him, but you're going to be on TV getting paid for doing pretty much nothing. He was just there filming segments and being shown in the crowd. That was really about it. Who the hell would turn that shit down, But anyway, so he actually talks about how when he and Eddie would film their vignettes, when Eddie would be like, oh, I'm going to tell you a bedtime story, Dominic, like we saw the clip here in this episode, that after every take, they did about 5 or 6 takes in the playground that day, that Eddie would give him a Twizzler, which is pretty funny. Dominic got asked a lot, as you would probably expect, especially back then when wrestling, there was a lot of, even back in 2005 among kids. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the same way today. I'm sure it is. In 3rd grade, people don't really know whether wrestling's real or fake. Everyone watches it as a kid. And all of his classmates were asking him, who's your real dad, Dominic? Is it Eddie or Ray? Bring your dad to school day. career day at school that year must have been very confusing for those kids in that class, and especially Dominic. But I thought that was funny when he brought that up. So Ray discusses how Eddie, when he was motivated, the guy was unstoppable. He could do some great shit. And during that storyline, he was on his game. Eddie was on a completely different level in 2005. He was so good. And they really worked hard to give fans a worthy payoff, which they did. In that ladder match at SummerSlam 05, and it was a ladder match where the custody of Dominic was on the line, which was hilarious how they phrased that. And I'm sure a lot of non-wrestling fans now who watched wrestling back then very much remember this angle. So Dominic talked about how obviously he was in the crowd for this. It was very hard for him to watching the ladder matches that the Hardy Boys would have and stuff like that. And, how hard it is on the body. So it was hard to see, two very close people to him, and that being Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, have this type of match. He just really wanted them to be safe. He had one cue, but he didn't know what it was. He was kind of freaking out a little bit because he was supposed to get involved. He was supposed to have a cue. He didn't know what it was until he got nudged by someone. So that, led to him getting involved, shaking the ladder, and that was pretty much it. It wasn't a very hard job, but he got put in there and he shook the ladder, did what he was supposed to do, and got the hell out of there. And actually, Vicky Guerrero, the funny thing is that Dominic didn't miss his cue. Dominic did what he was supposed to do, got in there, got involved, played his role fine. He was okay. Vicky Guerrero, Eddie's wife, fucked up her cue to the point where if you go back and I don't know if it's still on the network or not. I'm sure it is, but it's definitely somewhere if you go back and watch it. Eddie gets fucking pissed because Vicky doesn't come out when she's supposed to. He's like, "Where the fuck is Vicky?" Like he's audibly yelling this, and maybe from afar it looks like he's just like rambling on as a heel or he's yelling to Rey Mysterio. But no, if you actually listen close enough, he's yelling at Vicky for missing her fucking cue and almost fucking up the finish of that match, which is so funny in retrospect. And I'm sure she was shaking in her boots after realizing that Eddie was pissed at her for missing this part of the match, which, this is something very important to Eddie. So for her to kind of not fuck up the match or come close to fucking up the match, I'm sure he was pretty pissed off about that. And I wouldn't want to be in her shoes in that moment. But anyway, so they do the match. She came out. Rey Mysterio won. Rey had a pretty rough landing at one point. He fell off the ladder, like in between that same ladder, and it was a pretty rough landing. But it was a great match. He loved the match. Loved the feud. Rey Mysterio wins. They ride off into the sunset. So they transition from there into Eddie's passing. Rey Mysterio remembers last seeing Eddie at the SmackDown taping, like right before he passed away. And they were going to take the same flight from Phoenix to Minneapolis, I think he said. They were going to take the same flight, and the Rey Mysterio had to get his flight changed to a red-eye flight. So they never ended up taking the same flight. So he said, see you on the flight. Didn't get to see him on the flight because he took a different flight instead. He found out when he got to where he was going from the driver that worked for WWE, I believe, that Rey Mysterio, or rather that Eddie Guerrero, passed away, and he couldn't believe it. So I think that was in Phoenix. He went to Minneapolis instead for whatever reason. Maybe it was a layover, I don't know. So they arrive in Phoenix. I believe that's where the ultimate destination is here. And when he got there, he was right around the corner from the hotel where Eddie passed. How he didn't find out before that is beyond me. I know this is 2005. Not everyone has a smartphone. No one had a smartphone in 2005. But that's crazy. He didn't really find out about it until he arrived at the place from the fucking driver as opposed to someone else calling. I don't know. I guess he was in a car or so. Maybe not. I'm not sure how that guy found out, but whatever. That's still pretty fucking crazy. So he raced to the hotel. He talked to the doctor outside of the hotel room, and he asked him if he could see Eddie's body before they took it away. So he allows him to go in the ring. He allows him to go in the room, sees his body laying out on the ground right beside the bed, just breaks down in tears. Eddie Guerrero, or rather Chavo Guerrero was there. He was broken too, Rey Mysterio said. Everyone was broken. So really, I mean, could you imagine walking in that room knowing your friend is dead? Like, not your friend, but like your best friend, your brother, your uncle, he's not his uncle. In Chavo's case, it was his uncle, but you know what I mean? Someone that's like a brother, like blood, like, family to you, knowing that he's dead and that you have to walk in there and see the body. I don't know if I could do it, honestly. Like, I don't blame the guy because he wanted to see Eddie one last time before they took him away. And I guess that's what funerals are for, but still like an open casket type situation, but that's still like, that's unbelievable to me. Like that's absolutely surreal. I've never heard this side of the story from Rey Mysterio before, so I thought this was absolutely insane. So right after that, both rosters, Raw and SmackDown, left for a European tour, I guess, which was taking place right after Eddie died. Right after the funeral, they left for Europe. So everyone, he said, had a really tough time dealing with it. But Rey Mysterio then thought, hey, what would Eddie do? What would Eddie want us to do? And that's to, hey, no matter what, the show must go on. So he ended up dedicating everything to Eddie Guerrero in the next couple of months at house shows, spoke about Eddie after his matches, stuff like that, which was really cool. So then fast forward a couple months, he dedicates his Rumble performance before the Rumble takes place at a press conference to Eddie Guerrero. I wasn't watching back then, so I wasn't a fan back in 2006, so I can't say this for sure. I figured people kind of knew going into the show that Rey Mysterio was going to win. I don't know if they laid it on too heavy here. Rey Mysterio even said, he's like, people wanted me to win, but I wasn't a favorite to win. Is that true? Like, I don't know. I wasn't watching back then, so I'm not exactly sure. I feel like people kind of knew that Rey Mysterio was going to win, if not Triple H. I know he had already won by that point in 2002, but he went on to face John Cena for the championship at WrestleMania on the Raw side. But didn't people kind of have an idea that Rey Mysterio was going to win? Maybe Randy. I know Randy was an original, the original plan, I think, to face Batista at WrestleMania, but Batista had to vacate his championship right before this event. So I don't think people really expected, Orton to win at this point. I mean, I guess maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, would you guys know? I mean, you guys probably have a much better idea about this than I do. Was Rey Mysterio favored going into that show? If I did enough research, I could probably figure it out and find message boards and stuff like that with people's favorites to win the Rumble. But I don't think everyone really thought that he didn't have a chance of winning, because he was really laying the Eddie stuff on thick at that point on SmackDown, from what I can recall, from what I've seen and whatnot. So I don't know. I thought that was not predictable, but a lot of people, it wasn't a complete shock, is what I'm saying here. So anyway, Rey Mysterio said that he would change absolutely nothing about that night at the Royal Rumble. We hear from Jonathan Coachman, who competed in that Rumble. Why, I have no idea. He said he felt good about his performance. Obviously joking, but I thought that was funny. Rey Mysterio talks about how he remembers doing the double 619 to Triple H and Randy Orton. Coachman praises Triple H for doing the right thing whenever it's necessary. Maybe not always the right thing, like he should have lost to Booker T at WrestleMania 19, but that's neither here nor there in this episode. He talks about how Triple H mostly does the right thing whenever it's necessary in terms of putting people over. Whatever the story, whatever is needed for that story, Triple H does it. And he did it in this moment. He put over Rey Mysterio, allowed him to eliminate him, pulls Rey out of the ring, beats him up at ringside, throws him back in. People thought it was over. Dominic, watching at home, thought it was over. He thought, his dad was done for. It was done, that he was going to lose. There was a nice run while it lasted. So Orton's in there. He's the last man. Rey Mysterio says that he loves making magic with Randy Orton. They have a really, really close friendship with each other, which Rey Mysterio posted about, I guess both of them, but Randy Orton posted about that all the time, so I guess that kind of makes sense. They had a feud a couple years ago, too, on SmackDown when Rey Mysterio came back in late 2018. They had a very brief feud at the end of that year as well, in addition to their feud in 2006. So anyway, Dominic was shocked, when he ended up winning the whole match, and it was such a great moment. Dominic was happy. The place went nuts. For all the boos that, not overwhelming, but the audible boos that Rey Mysterio got in Chicago when he won the World Championship, what the fuck happened? Because the place came unglued from what I saw here when Rey Mysterio won the Rumble. That's not one of my favorite Rumble matches. It was a good Rumble, not great. Rey Mysterio didn't really do a lot during the match itself, aside from the final few minutes with Triple H and Randy Orton. But that crowd went fucking nuts in Miami that night when Rey Mysterio won. It was a really, really cool moment. And Rey even said as such. He said it was such a great moment that I had to let Eddie know he was there. He knew that he was there. I knew that he was there, even though it was a moment cheer for the both of us. When I won, Eddie won is basically what he's saying here. So, yeah, that reaction was crazy. So, for the reaction that he received at Mania, the subpar reaction when he won the World Championship, that it wasn't really what it should have been, what the hell changed in 2 or 3 months? I guess you can kind of say the same thing about Becky Lynch. Not that people were booing when she won the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania last year. That's far from the case. But she didn't feel as hot as she did than when she won the Rumble a couple months earlier. So I guess I get it. But he got, booed. Why, though? I still don't understand that in retrospect. Was it because he wasn't believable, or they forced the Eddie thing too much? I don't know. He just wasn't, I know he wasn't booked like a good world champion after that. He was booked like shit for the most part. He was always fucking losing. He was made to look like a loser constantly. Not like an underdog way either. He was just made to look incredibly weak. But before that, I don't know why anyone would be booing him aside from like, oh, they laid it on too thick. It was too predictable. I don't know. Chicago's a weird crowd. But anyway, they talk about how he went on to win the world championship, excuse me, at WrestleMania 22 in Chicago a couple months later. We also hear from Ray again, and he reveals that he actually visited Eddie's grave for the first time last year. Eddie passed away this year actually passed away 15 years ago. Is that right? Am I doing the math correctly? Yeah. 2020, 2005, 15 years ago. That's absolutely insane. And it took him 14 years to finally go visit his grave, which is, again, insane. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't want to, or he felt it wasn't the right time. I don't know. He didn't know he would be so emotional. I mean, he passed away so long ago, but he was flooded with all the memories that they had together, now realizing that he's not going to see him anymore. You know, he's gone. So all those memories about him passing away came back even 14 years later. And he said that he cried a lot. Everyone cried a lot, I'm sure. I don't know. It looked like Batista was there too. Maybe I'd have to go back and look at the picture, but it looked like Batista was there as well. But yeah, just a really emotional moment. If that wasn't Batista, it looked like fucking Rey Mysterio unmasked, which was weird. So I'm not sure why they would show that. But it was still a very good picture. But he says to close this thing out, Eddie, I miss you, bro. I love you. A really tear-jerking moment to end on here. I thought that was, God, I'm almost in tears now talking about it. It was such a sad ending, but like in a good way. It was a very emotional, fitting ending for this special here. But I thought it was great. Absolutely well worth checking out on the WWE Network. Untold, the Ray, Eddie, and the Rumble story. I thought this was absolutely tremendous. Probably the longest one yet, but again, well worth the watch, so definitely do so. Again, I apologize for sounding sick, the coughing, everything else, congestion. I'm not nearly as bad as I was last week when I recorded hashtag. It started at that point, got really bad on Friday and Saturday, and now I'm just still coughing a little bit and just sound congested. But hopefully it's gone by the Rumble weekend. The Royal Rumble is quickly approaching. It's already Tuesday. What the fuck? That's absolutely insane. The pay-per-view's on Sunday. I still have a ton to do to catch up. We have the NWA pay-per-view on Friday. We have Worlds Collide on Saturday. I'm going to a Northeast Wrestling show that night. And then the Rumble's on Sunday. So it's going to be a crazy weekend. But that being said, I'm not sure when any of this shit will be up because I have a lot to do as it is. But there is new network content coming this weekend. Also, too, I should mention this, Ms. and Mrs. is back, I think, next Wednesday. So obviously when that gets brought back for Season 2, I think it airs right after NXT. So I won't watch it until Thursday at the earliest because I watch either NXT after Dynamite or, Dynamite after NXT. So I'm not going to watch it on Wednesdays. But that will be back, and when it does come back, I'll be reviewing that on Fridays probably. The review won't be up on Thursday. It'll be up on Friday as it was when it was airing on Tuesdays. But this weekend, though, on the network, we have a couple different things. First, the Chronicle on John Morrison. So they do the Chronicles before all of the pay-per-views, from what I understand, from what I've seen anyway. And they're always great. The John Morrison one should be especially interesting because he's been gone for over 8 years. He just came back. I'm a big Jomo fan, so it's going to be cool to see him with The Miz, backstage at SmackDown, whatever. And the kind of the process, the behind-the-scenes look at his WWE return. That's going up, I think, after the Worlds Collide show on Saturday. Then after the Royal Rumble pay-per-view on Sunday is the 24 on WrestleMania 35, which I'm also very excited to watch because I was at that pay-per-view. I was at WrestleMania 35. So I'm very excited to see that show. Obviously not see me. I was up in the 300 section with Alexis, but relive that show, everything leading up to that show. It was such a great, great weekend. One of the craziest weekends of my entire life, let's put it that way, in a good way. But I'm looking forward to watching that when I have the time. Hopefully that review's up on Monday at some point, maybe. Excuse me, Jesus, I got to get fucking healthy first. And then the Chronicle should hopefully be up. The review of that should be up on Sunday, hopefully. Like I said, I still got to watch Worlds Collide, do other shit, so we'll see. But I got to get out of here. I'm feeling like shit my voice is. I'm only getting worse by talking more, but I'll catch you guys very soon right here on the channel. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We're quickly approaching, I believe, 3,900 subscribers. We're very, very close, so let's try to hit that mark soon. I appreciate it, And yeah, just have a great rest of your week, guys. Enjoy the Royal Rumble this weekend. I'm Graham Giusematthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.